Stop renting your time. Own something that compounds. There's a moment that arrives in every person's life, usually somewhere in their 30s or 40s, when they look up from the treadmill and realize something unsettling. They've been working for 15, maybe 20 years. They've been responsible. They've shown up. They've done what they were told. And yet, despite all that effort, despite all those hours, they're not much further ahead than they were a decade ago. The paycheck comes in, the bills go out, and at the end of the month, there's not much left. And worst of all, they realize that if they stop working, even for a few months, everything falls apart. This is the moment when most people first understand the difference between renting your time and owning something that compounds. But by then, they've already lost years they can never get back. Warren Buffett understood this distinction when he was 11 years old. Most of us don't figure it out until we're halfway through our careers, if we figure it out at all. And that difference in timing, that gap in understanding, explains almost everything about why wealth accumulates in some hands and evaporates in others. This isn't a story about getting rich quick. It's not about side hustles or passive income schemes. It's about a fundamental shift in how you think about your relationship with money and time. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let me show you what I mean. When you work a job, any job, you're engaged in a transaction. You give your employer 8 hours, they give you money. It's clean. It's simple. It's how most of the economy functions. But here's what almost nobody stops to consider. That transaction ends the moment you stop working. You rent out your time, you get paid for that time, and then it's over. There's no residual. There's no compounding. There's no leverage. Next week, you have to do it again. Next month, same thing. Next year, still the same. You're on a treadmill, and the treadmill never stops unless you stop. And if you stop, the money stops. Now contrast that with ownership. When you own something, an asset, a business, a piece of intellectual property, the relationship with time changes completely. The asset can work while you sleep. It can grow while you're on vacation. It can compound while you're doing something else entirely. This is what Buffett figured out early. He wasn't smarter than everyone else. He wasn't more talented. He simply understood that buying assets that generate value over time was fundamentally different from trading hours for dollars. And once he understood that, he organized his entire life around acquiring and holding assets that would compound. The word compound is important here, and most people use it without really understanding what it means. Compounding isn't just growth, it's growth on growth. It's the snowball effect. You start with something small, and if you leave it alone, if you let it work, it doesn't just get bigger in a straight line. It accelerates. The gains from year 1 become part of the base for year 2. The gains from year 2 become part of the base for year 3. And after enough time, after enough cycles, the numbers stop making intuitive sense. This is why Buffett often says that his wealth is primarily a function of living in America, having good genes, so he lived a long time, and compound interest. The first two, he couldn't control. The third, he could, and he did. Here's a question worth sitting with for a moment. If you took every dollar you've earned in your life, and you could go back and make one change, what would create the most wealth today? Most people instinctively think they should have earned more, worked harder, gotten better jobs. But that's not the answer. The answer is they should have converted more of their earned dollars into assets earlier. They should have stopped renting out their time as quickly as possible and started owning things that compound. Because the difference between someone who earns $100,000 a year and spends $95,000, versus someone who earns $100,000 and spends $70,000 and invests the difference. That difference after 30 years isn't 30%. It's not even double. It's exponential. And the gap widens every single year. Buffett has told a story many times about buying his first stock at age 11. He bought 3 shares of Citi Service Preferred for $38 a share. The stock dropped immediately to $27, and he was terrified. Eventually, it climbed back to $40, and he sold, relieved to escape with a small profit. Then he watched it go to $200. He never forgot that lesson. He learned that holding, that giving assets time to compound, that resisting the urge to sell too soon, this was where the real money was made. Not in the buying, not in the selling, in the waiting, in the compounding. Most people never learn this lesson because they never own anything long enough to see it compound. They buy a stock, it goes up 10%, they sell and feel smart. They buy a rental property, it appreciates a bit, they sell and take the profit. They start a side business, it makes a little money, they shut it down and move on to the next thing. They're constantly churning, constantly transacting, constantly staying busy. But they're not compounding, because compounding requires patience. It requires you to do nothing, which is the hardest thing in the world for most people. There's a famous Buffett quote where he says, "The stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient." That's not just about stock trading. It's a philosophy about life and wealth. The people who get rich, truly rich, are the ones who figure out how to own assets that compound and then have the discipline to leave them alone. Everyone else is just renting their time and hoping they can rent it at a slightly higher rate next year. Let's talk about what this looks like in practice, because abstract concepts are useless unless you can apply them. Imagine 2 people, both starting their careers at age 25. Person A follows the conventional path. They get a job, they work hard, they get raises, they climb the ladder. By age 40, they're making a good income, maybe $150,000 a year. They live in a nice house, they drive a nice car, they take nice vacations, they feel successful. And by most standards, they are. But here's the problem. If they stop working, the money stops. They've built a lifestyle that requires constant income. They have no assets generating cash flow. They've rented their time at increasingly higher rates, but they don't own anything that compounds. Person B takes a different approach. They also get a job and work hard. But from the very beginning, they're thinking about ownership. They live below their means, not because they're cheap, but because they understand that every dollar they don't spend is a dollar they can convert into an asset. They start buying index funds in their 20s. They buy a small rental property in their 30s. They start a side business that generates cash flow. They reinvest dividends. They never sell unless absolutely necessary. And here's what happens. By age 40, their salary might only be $100,000, lower than person A. But they have assets, a stock portfolio that's generating dividends, a rental property that's generating cash flow, a business that runs without them, and those assets are compounding. Every year, they generate more income. Every year, they buy more assets. Every year, the gap between their earned income and their asset income narrows. And by age 50, person B might not even need their job anymore. The assets are covering their expenses. They've escaped the time for money trap. They've stopped renting their time and started owning things that compound. This isn't hypothetical. This is exactly what Buffett did. He started his investment partnership at age 25, with $105,000 from friends and family. He lived frugally. He reinvested everything. He focused on buying businesses and stocks that would compound over decades, and he never stopped. By his 50s, the compounding had reached escape velocity. By his 60s, he was unimaginably wealthy, not because he worked harder than everyone else, because he owned assets that compounded for 40, 50, 60 years. Now, most people hear this and they think, well, that's great for Warren Buffett, but I'm not a genius investor. I don't know how to pick stocks or buy businesses. And that's a fair objection. But here's the thing. You don't need to be Warren Buffett. You don't need to pick individual stocks. You don't need to start the next Amazon. You just need to understand the principle and apply it at whatever scale makes sense for your life. You can buy index funds, which are baskets of hundreds of stocks, and let them compound for decades. You can buy a rental property and let tenants pay down the mortgage while the property appreciates. You can build any number of small assets that generate income without requiring your constant time and attention. The specific vehicle doesn't matter nearly as much as the underlying principle. Stop renting your time. Start owning things that compound. There's a mental model that Buffett uses that's helpful here. He talks about the difference between your inner scorecard and your outer scorecard. Your outer scorecard is what the world sees. Your job title, your salary, your car, your house. Your inner scorecard is what you know about your actual financial position. How much you own versus how much you owe. How much of your income is earned versus how much is generated by assets. How dependent you are on your next paycheck. Most people optimize for the outer scorecard. They want to look successful. They want the trappings of wealth. But Buffett optimized for the inner scorecard. He drove an old car. He lived in a modest house. He didn't care what people thought. He cared about owning assets that compounded. And that focus, that prioritization, that's what allowed him to build real wealth. This is where most people go wrong. They get a raise and they immediately upgrade their lifestyle. Bigger house, nicer car, more expensive vacations. The raise gets absorbed by lifestyle inflation and they're no further ahead. They're still renting their time, just at a higher rate. They never convert earned income into assets. They never start the compounding process. And because they never start, they never benefit. They work for 40 years and end up with nothing but a 401k that might, if they're lucky, cover their basic expenses in retirement. That's not wealth. That's just deferred poverty. Buffett has said that the most important investment you can make is in yourself. And that's true. Skills, knowledge, expertise, these things increase your earning potential. But here's the part people miss. Investing in yourself is only step one. Step two is converting that increased earning potential into assets that compound. If you develop skills that allow you to earn more, but you spend everything you earn, you've just upgraded your treadmill. You're running faster, but you're still running. The only way off the treadmill is through ownership. Let's talk about time, because time is the secret ingredient in compounding that nobody wants to hear about. Compounding takes time, a lot of time. This is why most people never experience it. They're impatient. They want results now. They want to see their money double in a year. They want to get rich quick. And because they want speed, they either take stupid risks that blow up, or they give up on investing entirely because it feels too slow. But here's the math. If you invest $10,000 at age 25 and it compounds at 10% annually, by age 65, you'll have $452,000. If you wait until age 35 to start, you'll have $174,000. If you wait until 45, you'll have 67,000. Same investment, same return, dramatically different outcomes. The only variable is time. Starting 10 years earlier doesn't make you twice as wealthy. It makes you 2.5 times wealthier. Starting 20 years earlier makes you almost 7 times wealthier. Time is the multiplier, and you can't get it back. This is why Buffett started so young. He bought his first stock at 11. He started his investment partnership at 25. He bought Berkshire Hathaway in his 30s. He gave himself 50, 60, 70 years for things to compound. Most of his wealth was created after age 60, not because he got better at investing, but because the compounding finally reached the exponential phase. The snowball got big enough that it started rolling on its own, but it only got there because he started early and never stopped. So what does this mean for you? It means the most important decision you can make today is to stop renting your time and start owning something. Anything. Start small if you have to. Buy a single share of an index fund. Open a high-yield savings account and start building capital. Learn about real estate. Learn about businesses. The specific starting point doesn't matter. What matters is that you cross the threshold from being purely an earner to being an owner. Because once you own something, even something small, your relationship with time changes. You start to see opportunities differently. You start to understand leverage and compounding. You start to think like an investor instead of an employee. And over time, over years and decades, that shift in thinking compounds just like money does. There's a concept in physics called potential energy. It's energy that's stored, waiting to be released. A boulder at the top of a hill has potential energy. It's not moving, but it has the capacity to move, and when it does, it releases enormous force. Compounding is financial potential energy. When you own assets that compound, you're storing financial energy. It might not look like much in the early years. The numbers might seem small, insignificant even, but you're building potential. And the longer you let it build, the more force it generates when it finally releases. This is why Buffett's wealth exploded in his later years. The potential energy had been building for decades, and by the time he was in his 60s and 70s, the release was unstoppable. Most people never build this potential energy because they're constantly spending it. They earn money and immediately convert it into consumption. They never let it accumulate. They never let it compound. And because they don't, they're always starting from zero. Every month, every year, they're back at the beginning, trading time for money, hoping they can trade just a little more time next month. It's exhausting, and it's unnecessary, because the alternative, the path of ownership and compounding, it's available to anyone. It doesn't require genius. It doesn't require luck. It requires discipline, patience, and time. Nothing more. Here's a final thought to sit with. Warren Buffett is one of the wealthiest people in history. He's given away tens of billions of dollars, and he's still worth over $100 billion. But here's what's interesting. He doesn't live like someone worth $100 billion. He lives in the same house he bought in the 1950s. He eats at McDonald's. He drives himself to work. By outward appearances, you'd never know he's one of the richest people alive. Why? Because he understands something most people don't. Wealth isn't about what you spend. It's about what you own. It's about the assets that compound, the businesses that generate cash flow, the investments that work while you sleep, the fancy cars and the big houses and the private jets. Those are just ways to convert wealth back into consumption. They're ways to go backwards. And Buffett has no interest in going backwards. He's interested in compounding. He's interested in ownership. He's interested in time working for him instead of against him. You don't have to live like Warren Buffett. You don't have to eat at McDonald's or drive an old car. But you do have to understand the principle. Stop renting your time. Start owning things that compound. Make that shift as early as you possibly can, and then let time do the heavy lifting. Because time is the most powerful force in finance, and it's the one thing you can't buy back. Every day you spend purely as an earner, purely renting out your time, is a day of compounding you've lost forever. But every day you spend as an owner, as someone building assets that compound, is a day that's working for you. Not just today, but for every day that comes after. The treadmill is always there. The job, the paycheck, the bills, the endless cycle of trading time for money. Most people stay on it their entire lives. They don't know there's another way, or they know, but they never take the first step off. But you know now. You understand the difference between renting your time and owning something that compounds. The question is whether you'll act on it, whether you'll make the shift from earner to owner, whether you'll give yourself the gift of time and compounding. Because once you do, once you stop renting and start owning, everything changes. Not overnight, not in a year, but over time, over decades, the change is profound. And when you look back, you'll realize that this decision, this shift in thinking, was the most important financial decision you ever made.